I never thought something like this could happen to me, not in broad daylight, not in front of so many people. I was just walking out of the grocery store, minding my own business, when 2 police officers suddenly stepped right in front of me and demanded, "Ma'am, show me your ID." My heart jumped, and for a moment, I froze.
Why me?
I'm a grown woman, a professional. I've faced challenges before, but this was different. The way they looked at me wasn't just curiosity, it was suspicion, and that sting, it hit deeper than I expected. I felt the eyes of everyone around us, the weight of their silent questions pressing down on me like a heavy fog. I reached slowly into my purse, hands trembling slightly, trying to stay calm. Inside, I was swirling with emotions, shock, disbelief, frustration, and yes, a quiet fear I wasn't ready to admit. They had no idea who I was. They couldn't possibly know that the woman standing in front of them was the head of Homeland Security. The irony of it all wasn't lost on me. Here I was, entrusted with the safety and security of an entire nation, yet in this moment, I was reduced to just another black woman being questioned on the street. It was humiliating, it was unfair, but I kept my voice steady, my posture strong, even when my heart was pounding beneath my chest. This encounter was about so much more than an ID, it was a reminder of a reality I face every day, a reality that power and position don't always protect you from how the world sees you. I've spent most of my life breaking barriers. As the head of Homeland Security, I hold one of the highest and most demanding positions in the government. But what people don't always see is the journey it took to get here. The hard fights, the sleepless nights, and the constant pressure to prove myself again and again, just because I'm a black woman in a world that often doubts both. From the very beginning, I knew this path wouldn't be easy. I faced stereotypes that tried to box me in, assumptions that questioned my competence, and a world that sometimes made me feel invisible, even when I was the one making critical decisions for the safety of millions. I remember countless times when I was the only woman, or the only person of color in the room, feeling eyes silently judging every word I said, every move I made, but I refused to let that stop me. I worked harder than anyone else, not just to succeed for myself, but to open doors for those who would come after me. The pride I feel in serving my country is immense. It's a responsibility I carry with honor every single day, knowing that my decisions impact lives across the nation. Still, the cost has been high. My family has sacrificed so much time together, quiet moments, and sometimes even my own peace of mind. I'm constantly under scrutiny, watched more closely than most. There's a weight that comes with representing not just myself, but an entire community that has been overlooked and underestimated for too long. That's why what happened with those officers wasn't just another frustrating encounter, it was deeply personal. It wasn't just about being asked for my ID, it was about being seen through a lens of suspicion instead of respect. It was a harsh reminder that no matter my title or accomplishments, the world sometimes refuses to see me as anything other than what my skin looks like. This moment cut deeper than any professional challenge because it stripped away the identity I've built with so much effort. And that's a pain I carry with me still. The moment the officers stepped in front of me, everything seemed to slow down. Their uniforms were sharp, their expressions hard and unreadable. One of them, a tall man with a stern voice, said, "Ma'am, we need to see some ID." His tone wasn't polite or questioning, it was a command. There was no explanation, no reason given, just an order, like I was already guilty of something. I looked up at him, trying to steady my breathing, trying not to let the shock show on my face. I knew the rules: comply, don't escalate. So I reached into my purse slowly, fingers trembling a little, and pulled out my wallet. "Is there a problem, officer?" I asked, my voice calm, but firm. Inside though, a storm was raging. I felt anger bubbling beneath my skin. Why me? Why this treatment? I've led departments, made critical decisions, and here I was being treated like a suspect. The other officer, younger and less sure, glanced at me and muttered, "Just routine, man. You understand." Routine. That word stung. How many times had I heard it before? Routine stops that made me feel invisible, or worse, dangerous, just because of the color of my skin. I wanted to say so much, to tell them who I was, but I held back. Instead, I handed over my ID. The taller officer took it, flipping it over, and squinting at the photo. I could see the confusion flicker across his face, followed quickly by panic. "You're the head of Homeland Security." I didn't say a word at first. Inside, I wrestled with whether to correct their assumptions sooner or let them stew in their disbelief a little longer. It was a strange power shift. Here I was, someone who oversees security for the entire nation, and they didn't recognize me. Instead, they had assumed the worst. "Ma'am, we didn't know. This is just procedure," the younger officer said, avoiding my gaze. "Procedure," I echoed softly, the word tasting bitter in my mouth. I wanted to ask how many other black women they had stopped like this, how many times someone like me had been made to feel less than, just because of their skin. Their eyes darted nervously between my ID and my face. I felt a flush of humiliation, but I refused to let it show. I was more than their assumptions. I was more than their bias. The taller officer finally returned my ID, his voice shaky. "We're sorry for the inconvenience, ma'am," but apology felt empty. It couldn't undo the feeling of being singled out, the silent accusation hanging in the air, as if I was a threat simply for existing. As they stepped back and signaled for their backup car to move along, I stood there for a moment, heart pounding. I thought about speaking up, telling them the truth about how wrong this was, how it felt like a wound that wouldn't heal, but something inside me held back. Maybe it was fatigue, or the desire to keep moving forward without another confrontation. So I gathered myself, walked away with my head held high, carrying both the weight of the moment, and a quiet burning resolve that this would not define me. That moment with the officers wasn't the first time I'd been judged by the color of my skin. In fact, it echoed so many painful memories, moments when I was seen not for who I was, but for the assumptions others made, because I was a black woman. I remember early in my career, sitting in a boardroom filled with men who barely hid their surprise when I spoke up. Their eyes would narrow, their voices would shift, as if questioning how someone like me could possibly belong at that table. I was often the only woman, the only person of color, and it felt like every word I said had to be twice as sharp, twice as convincing just to be heard. There was one meeting in particular that still haunts me. A colleague dismissed my strategy outright, not because it lacked merit, but because I was too young, and too inexperienced. What they didn't realize was how much I had sacrificed to get there. Years of hard work, late nights, and constant learning. Instead of support, I faced skepticism, and instead of encouragement, I met condescension. Outside of work, the challenges didn't stop. I've been followed around stores, assumed to be a threat, or a thief, simply because of how I looked. On one occasion, I was pulled over on the highway, not once, but twice in a single month, by officers who questioned my license and registration with unnecessary suspicion. Each time, I felt a wave of humiliation wash over me, even though I knew I was doing nothing wrong. But these moments didn't break me. If anything, they built a fire inside me, a fierce determination to prove that my worth wasn't defined by anyone else's prejudices. I learned to carry myself with a quiet strength, to speak with conviction, and to rise above the noise of doubt. Yet, there's a bittersweet part to all of this. To the public, I am seen as powerful, a woman who commands respect, who holds a crucial role in national security. But behind the scenes, I carry the invisible scars of those moments when I was underestimated, dismissed, or unfairly targeted. It's a lonely balance to hold, the pride of achievement, alongside the pain of discrimination, and it's a reality many black women know all too well, that no matter how far you climb, the shadow of bias can still follow. So when those officers stopped me that day, it wasn't just about them questioning my ID, it was a painful reminder of every time I'd been reduced to a stereotype, every time my identity was questioned, and every time I had to prove that I belonged. And that's why their panic, their surprise when they finally saw who I was, felt both like a victory and a heartbreak all at once, because it showed me just how deep those biases run, even when faced with the truth. The moment the officer's eyes landed on my ID, everything changed. I saw the slow dawning of recognition spread across his face like a shadow creeping over a wall. He blinked, glanced again, and then looked up at me, with a mixture of shock and disbelief. You're the head of Homeland Security." The words hung in the air, heavy and almost surreal. I could see the panic start to rise in his eyes, as if the ground beneath him had shifted unexpectedly. The confident authority they'd carried when stopping me now faltered, replaced by uncertainty. For a brief moment, the power dynamic that had been so clearly against me flipped completely. I felt a rush of emotions, a strange mix of vindication, sadness, and anger swirling inside. Here I was, someone entrusted with the security of the entire nation, yet, moments ago, I was just a black woman being questioned on the street. The irony wasn't lost on me. It was a bitter pill to swallow, knowing that despite my title and responsibilities, I was still vulnerable to the same prejudices as any other person who looked like me. The younger officer fidgeted awkwardly, avoiding my gaze. "Ma'am, we didn't know. This is standard procedure. We're sorry if we offended you." Their apologies felt hollow, rehearsed, the kind of words people say when they want to fix something, but don't fully understand the damage they caused. "Standard procedure," I repeated, my voice calm but firm. "But that procedure needs to change. Because this is exactly why so many people don't trust those who are supposed to protect them." The taller officer swallowed hard and nodded, clearly uncomfortable. "We understand, ma'am. We'll do better." I looked at them both, steady and resolute. "I'm not here to lecture you, but I want you to understand that what you did wasn't just about protocol. It was about seeing me as a threat, simply because of my skin, and that's a problem." There was silence for a moment, broken only by the distant sounds of traffic. I handed back my ID, and took a deep breath. I carry a great responsibility every day, but moments like this remind me how much work still lies ahead, not just for me, but for all of us. As they stepped back and signaled for their vehicle to move along, I felt a strange weight settle in my chest. The moment was over, but the emotional toll lingered. It was exhausting to be powerful in the eyes of the nation, and yet so vulnerable in moments like these. I thought about all the times I had to prove myself, to fight against invisible walls built on prejudice and fear. I was proud of the role I held, but that pride was often tempered by the reality of who I was beneath the title. A black woman living in a world that sometimes refused to see her as anything but a stereotype. That day, the officers saw the name and title on my ID, and panicked. But what they didn't see was the strength it took for me to walk away with my dignity intact, knowing that the fight for respect and justice was far from over. After the officers walked away, leaving me standing there with my ID back in hand, a heavy silence settled inside me, one that no apology could quite erase. The rush of emotions I had felt earlier didn't disappear. Instead, they settled into a deep ache that lingered long after I left that street corner. This wasn't just an isolated moment, it was a stark reminder of the complicated reality I live every day, a reality where my power and position don't always shield me from the harshness of systemic bias. Personally, the encounter shook me in ways I hadn't expected. It made me question how far we've really come as a society, and how much farther we still need to go. I found myself replaying the scene over and over, feeling the sting of being reduced to suspicion because of my skin, even though I hold one of the most trusted jobs in the country. It was a reminder that no matter how successful or respected you become, racial prejudice can still find a way to creep in and remind you of your vulnerability. Professionally, it fueled a fire inside me. I felt the weight of responsibility even more acutely, to not only protect our nation, but to fight for a society where people are judged by their character, and not the color of their skin. I realized that my role was bigger than policy or security. It was about setting an example, pushing for systemic changes, and giving voice to those who face these kinds of humiliations every day. This moment also deepened my understanding of systemic racism, not just as an abstract concept, but as a lived experience. It showed me how deeply embedded bias is, and how it can affect even the most unexpected interactions. It was a painful but necessary lesson in humility and resilience, reminding me that power doesn't always equal protection. Sometimes the greatest strength comes from continuing the fight despite the setbacks, from standing tall when the world tries to knock you down. What this experience taught me most is that justice isn't just about laws or policies, it's about empathy, awareness and change. It's about recognizing the humanity in each person, beyond surface appearances and assumptions. It's about listening to stories like mine, and the millions of others who face bias quietly every day, often without the platform or power to speak out. I hope for a future where no one has to feel the sting of suspicion just because of how they look. A future where respect is automatic, not earned through struggle or title, where every person, regardless of race, background or role, can walk through the world feeling safe and seen. So to anyone listening who has faced this kind of bias, know you are not alone. Your pain is real, and your strength is powerful. And to those who may not understand this reality, I ask for empathy. Listen, learn, and stand with us, because change begins when we all see each other clearly, with compassion and respect. Together we can build a society where moments like mine become a thing of the past, a society where dignity and justice are not privileges, but rights. Thank you for listening to my story. It's not an easy one to share, but it's a story that matters, because it shines a light on an experience so many people face every day, yet so few talk about openly. Racial profiling and bias aren't just distant problems, they happen to real people, people with dreams, responsibilities and families, people who deserve respect and dignity. I hope my story helps you understand the weight of those moments, the hurt they cause, and the strength it takes to keep going. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like this video. Your support means more than you know, and if you've had experiences with unfair treatment or racial profiling, I encourage you to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters, and together we can raise awareness and foster understanding. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that bring light to important issues, stories that remind us we're not alone, and that change is possible. Finally, please share this video with your friends and family. The more people who hear these stories, the closer we get to a world where everyone is treated with fairness and respect. Remember, standing up against injustice starts with each of us. Every conversation, every act of kindness, and every moment of empathy builds a future where no one has to feel less than because of who they are. Thank you for being part of that future with me. Together we can make a difference.